to the Grappling with Podcast. Dr. Chris Hardy and William Walker will take a deep dive into topics covering wellness and prevention, performance, recovery, and injury management. Our mission is to provide the latest science-based information to help you get the most out of your grappling journey, both on and off the mats, and help you overcome any challenges you may be grappling with. Dr. Hardy is a licensed physician and BJJ practitioner, but the contents of the podcast are meant for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Please seek out personalized care from your own medical provider prior to implementing any medical treatment or intervention.
Bill is a licensed buffoon. He says things that are a little squirrely. Do not hold these things against his gym mates, his family, Chris Hardy, Harry Hardy, or anybody at his gym. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you still got AIDS in your throat?
No, it's not this time. I'm recovering. I'm in remission.
Doesn't sound like it.
I know. It's that stupid pollen, dude.
Just to warn people, he has full-blown monkeypox in his neck.
You know what it is? You know how that kind of an old dude cough and hack thing. That's what I feel like. I'm like, oh, hold on a second.
When they hit their 80s and it's just like they just cannot
constant
get
phlegm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
there you go.
it's creeping.
It is creeping. Yeah.
So
what is grass pollen right now?
It's a drinking game. Every time Chris has to clear his throat, take a shot.
Oh, you're gonna be drunk as fuck, dude. There you go.
Hit it.
Another one. Yeah, it's gonna be a rough one. Sorry, everyone.
It's okay. They're used to your flumminess.
Yeah. So, yeah, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. Got my weight back. Just figure you'd be wondering about that since a lot of people heard the podcast about me missing weight.
That was quite humorous.
Feeling good again.
Good. I'm glad.
Good 178.
Oh, that's a good weight.
I'm just living right there.
You and I are kind of closing in on the same. I'm like at 181 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels good.
Because you got a little thicky, right? You were
I was a little thick, 185. Yeah, it's not good for me. I want about 178 is like perfect for me. I think.
So you can kind of jump that 2 pounds, 78 to 80, just live in there.
Well, it's not just it. I feel good. I feel faster. That little bit makes a difference for me.
Cardio too. I feel
totally.
You can feel that 5-6 pounds,
big time. I can anyway.
Which we'll come back to actually later about cardio and muscle and people.
Oh, cool.
We got a question about that, but we wanted to tease something.
Oh, yeah. So I've been doing, I'm always complaining and the woe is me and I'm old, blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Well aware.
Yeah. And the recovery and I'm always, crying in my whatever. I don't eat Cheerios, but if I did, I'd be crying in my Cheerios. But I've been doing something the last...
Raisin Bran. You're a Raisin Bran guy, aren't you?
No, dude. I don't eat cereal at all.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of the oldest person cereal there is.
Is that what it is?
I think Raisin Bran's up there.
Nah, dude.
Fiber One?
Fiber One's legit. What's the other one that looks like little pellets?
Oh.
Come on.
Grape nuts?
Yes.
Grape nuts.
I was like,
Grape
there's
nuts.
something that doesn't make sense.
Grape nuts, yeah. They're neither grape nor nuts.
No grapes, all nuts.
Excuse me. Here we go.
Take a shot.
So, yeah. So, despite of how I sound with all the pollen, I actually feel really good for the last week or so. And
you were coming back. You had a little wall.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I've been trying something new for recovery. I want to give it. It's pretty well researched in literature. It's not so common in the States. It's more common in Europe using this intervention. But I thought I'd give it a shot. I'm actually having my brother doing this stuff for other reasons too, and I want to talk about it on the next podcast. I'm going to kind of get a little more research and some more papers and kind of talk about the different applications of something that you can actually get over the counter.
And this is going to apply towards take a shot, the recovery, essentially.
Recovery, it also has a lot of medical applications too that aren't they're certainly not used over in the States. And it's one of the things that's escaped me even as a doc for a long time. And, I was just actually researching some more things to maybe help my brother with the medical condition he has that, things aren't really moving well with.
Yeah.
And so, we started him and I started reading the literature. I'm like, it has so many other applications. So we'll talk about it. I mean, my inflammation in my hand is pretty much gone.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling much more. Usually Mondays I'm like, hard training on Saturday. I feel like
strength on Sunday.
And I did strength training yesterday, and I feel pretty good. So
sweet.
We'll make sure it's not placebo.
What does your wearable say?
What I'm doing is I'm going to, because I have about a month of wearable, Brittany loves this, wearable data from previous. And so now I'm going to start wearing it again after a month of this intervention. And I want to see what it's looking like.
Got it.
So I'm going to actually do a little experiment on myself.
I like it.
So yeah, we'll talk about what that is at the next episode.
Sounds okay. So we'll probably do that next week.
Yep.
Okay. Sweet.
I want to know.
I know you do. That's why it's a tease. That's why it's called a tease.
Keeping us in the dark.
You know I don't like suspense.
I know.
Literally,
we've talked about it that she reads the end of the book, right?
The end of the book.
Or if it's a movie, she goes on
show.
and Googles what happens. Like Sixth Sense.
No.
It's so ridiculous.
I did not do that with that movie.
I'm just saying as an example.
That's true.
You
will
would.
do that. Yeah. I can't handle it.
And then she just sits there. And because now she knows. She knows. So then as I'm watching and I'm very entertained, all I see is like, go to that camera, Liv, is I'm watching, and then out of my peripheral, all I see is this.
Like something significant happens.
Yes,
it's related.
That's about to happen, and I just see her face. It's watching the TV, and then I see it start staring at me because she wants to see my reaction.
That's amazing.
And I just see her staring at me, and I have to like start turning my head more so I can't see her out of my peripheral. It's so ridiculous.
Does anybody else do that?
Yeah,
out
please.
in the audience.
Is there anybody else that has a spouse, significant other, that is just begging to ruin the plot?
But it's not ruined for me because it doesn't bother me. Like literally, anybody could tell me the ending of something. The only time I got upset, and maybe this is what cured me, was when the Harry Potter thing and Snape was killed on page 300 and whatever.
Did you ever hear about that?
Yes,
Yeah. Oh, I mentioned that. How it was when Nathan's hot dog Kobayashi was killing the game, and
that's not how I saw it though.
Right.
I saw it in an MIRC chat.
Right. So she saw it online somewhere, but when the book came out was about to come out that weekend, that's where Dumbledore dies. A guy on the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, or Snape, they announce him kind of like a fight, almost like, okay, and here's like the Ultimate Warrior, and as it's on ESPN, as he's walking up onto the stage, he pulls a sign out from behind his back, and it says Snape dies on page 342, and the book wasn't even out yet.
You could be called a piece of shit for that.
People wanted to hurt that guy. Like, he was hated. He was the guy that painted his face. I can't remember.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, then
he ain't no Joey Chestnut, I'll tell you that much.
Well, now endings, it doesn't ruin it for me. So
yeah,
okay.
She embraces it.
I do,
and it kills me.
That's pretty funny though.
Ever
literally kills me.
It actually makes me feel better.
You're a psycho.
I know.
So okay, we'll look forward to your thing there. Take 2 shots for that one.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
Volume. We had a question come in about, and we've talked about this, I believe it was episode maybe 20, where we have a whole episode on cold water therapy. And it's a little bit deeper dive than probably what we'll talk about right here.
Yeah.
And I sent that episode to them. The person,
to watch so they can, okay.
Yep, or to listen. And I don't remember exactly. I just know it was in early 20s, maybe even late teens, the episode, but you can see in the title it says cold water recovery. So if you want to know more about it, check that episode out. But let's touch on it a little bit.
Okay.
They had a pretty generic question. And 1, is it worth it to start doing? 2, how can you start doing it without buying a $5,000 cold immersion tank?
Yep.
What say you?
So, is it worth it? Absolutely.
Why?
It has a lot of health benefits.
Not even from athletic performance standpoint. But
I mean, just in general, especially morning cold water immersion can help set your circadian rhythm. In brief, we go through these heating and warming cycles naturally on a rhythm throughout the day and night, where our temperatures rise during the day, and then at night during sleep, they fall to their lowest point, usually around for a normal sleep pattern around 4 a.m. or something. And so that's the whole idea of taking a hot bath at night. It jump starts the cooling mechanism for your body. It kind of gives it a set point. Okay, now we should be cooling, right? Because that's circadian rhythm's thrown off by modern environment. Hold on one second.
Okay.
So sorry. Go ahead. You're going to ask the question.
When I do a TRT injection late at night, like 9 o'clock, let's say.
Yeah.
I find that's when I do my 1 a week injection, not the thing we were talking about where it's like twice in a week, right? And lower dose. I find that night I get pretty hot at night.
Yeah.
What is that?
That could be a thermogenic effect. I haven't really studied that or not.
Okay.
I mean, it could be.
Just the body working, essentially.
It might be.
Okay.
So,
but typically in that middle of the night, we're getting to our lowest point.
Right. And then in the morning, it seems counterintuitive. Well, then why? And then we should be warming up starting in the morning during the day. Mm-hmm. What happens then is if you get a cold exposure in the morning, it kind of jump starts that the body is trying to heat itself back up, right? So it kind of gives these little nice set points for your circadian rhythm to kind of dial it in as far as the temperature. It's pretty powerful. That's one, and that will help your sleep, even the night afterwards.
Would that be a good way if you do long flight or something and you're jet lag or you need to reset your clock a little bit? Could that maybe...
It might. I haven't seen it studied like that.
Maybe help?
I'm sure it could help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people say that they like to get a hard workout in, right off the plane.
Yeah.
And that actually helps them start to reset things.
It can be. It depends on what time we're talking about. There's so many variables in that, right? But that's one of the things.
Okay.
The mood elevation is significant. So if you have kind of depressive symptoms, especially you're having a rough time in the wintertime when not as much light, that increases, all our kind of feel-good neurotransmitters for a long time afterwards, 4 to 6 hours significantly after immersion, that is.
Interesting.
Andrew Huberman has a ton on this.
Okay.
If you listen to Huberman Lab, he has a lot of really, if you want to get geeky on it, he really goes through all the mechanisms behind that. It's really good. If you want to kind of listen to that, go look up his cold water exposure podcast. But norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, those are all elevated significantly over your baseline. And a lot of people, one of the symptoms of depression is kind of that don't feel like doing anything, kind of lethargic, that kind of thing.
For sure.
And, this really seems to help a lot of people.
And you're not just speaking from reading literature. You do that.
Myself.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I do have that seasonal affective type of thing big time, especially in Washington State. Yeah. And so it really, really helps quite a bit. It helps recovery too. Here's where there's some controversy. There is some pretty good data that if you're doing hard strength training and you do cold water right afterwards, you may be blunting the anabolic response because you're tearing down muscle, right? And you produce an inflammatory response after strength training. That's necessary as a stimulus to start rebuilding, right? And so there has been some studies showing that cold water immersion right after that, directly after, may blunt that response some. So, what a lot of people say is, typically wait 3 or 4 hours at least from strength training. Now, what's interesting is the research shows the opposite with endurance activity. They're saying that it actually can have a recovery benefit.
Which is always what I heard.
Even right afterwards. But you gotta see what the stimulus is.
Yeah.
And I look at jiu-jitsu as a combo of kind of both of those in a way. Mm-hmm. It's more of a strength endurance type of activity with some explosivity, depending on so I found a lot of benefit for my recovery. I don't have as much delayed onset muscle soreness. I feel like my inflammation's lower. Now, the other question was if I don't want to spend that kind of money.
Yeah.
I always ask people, how much do you spend on your car? You know, it's like the people that don't want to spend $5,000 on a bed, but they spend a third of their life in bed.
Right.
You know, prioritize things. But that being said,
shaming aside,
you can start with like cold showers. I don't think it has the same effect as actually immersion, but it is still a pretty good stimulus. So I would start out with cold showers. Wim Hof has a really nice protocol to start with.
Oh, okay.
He has a whole, you know, he's kind of the father of cold immersion. You probably guys, the Iceman, they call him, right? Yeah. But he has a nice, some information. If you, any of his books show like little protocols, like start out with this many minutes, start off alternating cold and hot, right? If you're just getting into it, because it can be rough. I mean, I can tell you, you know, I've talked about this on the podcast. Some mornings I get up, you're in a warm bed, your body's starting to heat up again. You're like, damn it, I don't want to get in that damn thing, because we have that cold plunge that's set at right now. It's set at 50.
So you also, you can start with showers. That's a free option,
totally,
to at least get a routine, to get your mental prep ready, and then there's cheap options. Go to a co-op, like not the grocery co-op, but
like a food feed
farmers feed kind of stuff. Maybe they'll have a nursery or something. And typically they'll have like large horse trough.
Yep, Rubbermaid makes one too, a 150-gallon one that I actually have. The problem with that is you got to cool it somehow. Yeah. And
depending on where you're at.
And it's problematic as far as getting something consistent. The shower's the same way, honestly. You know, the water in the summertime typically isn't as cold as in the dead of winter. Yeah. So it's variable. You do the best you can. Ice gets really expensive and cumbersome over time. I don't know.
But as like stages, that's a good entry, because I think those are typically around $100 for one that was big enough for you to sit in. Yep. And then there's another level, which is they have some of these barrels that are actually made for plunging and stuff like that, which I think actually start to get to that 300 to 500.
That's correct.
And then obviously once you get above that, you start getting into heavier duty.
Yeah, I like the cold plunge because it has a circulator, it has a filter. Yeah, you can set it at a temperature, and it just, you know, we set it at night. In the morning. Now we have 50-degree water that's clean. Right. You know,
and just so people know the levels, because there's levels of difficulty. Yeah. When you're plunged.
Yes. Right? So.
Start with white belt level.
Oh, we're going to use the Henner Gracie thing that he did.
Even though I wouldn't have given him credit, but
I got to give credit where credit's due. He did say that. And it's a good analogy, honestly. It's a good analogy. It is. You know, the analogy was, you know, getting in there up to your chest with your hands out. You know.
So you're submerged to about mid chest. Yeah. Your arms are kind of draped over the sides.
Right. As you submerge down, you should try to submerge to your neck, honestly. As you work your way down, try to get into your neck into the water. Now, the hands are the big deal, because we get a lot. We've talked about this before. I think we did one on performance, talking about cooling and heating. The soles of your feet, the places on your body where you can't grow hair, well, except for you.
How dare you.
And me, honestly. I'm starting to get in there too. But in general, for most of us, the palms, soles of our feet, and the upper portion of the face doesn't really have much of a capillary bed. It goes directly from artery to vein. And so they're heat exchangers, basically. They help cool and heat the body. So if you're overheated, you know, like someone has like heat exhaustion or something, you know, people are always trying to put the thing up someone's neck, when the better thing to really cool down their core is actually to cool their hands and feet. And so you'll actually get cooling of the blood that way much better. So I'm saying that
the same just under the eyes too,
exactly, right across the face. I'm saying this because when you put your hands in that cold water, that's going to cool your core temperature down very quickly. And so that's the next
even
level.
though your neck down is in, still people you'll see with their hands and arms draped. It's when you start to get those.
You put those hands in, and that's when it's rough. Now, the ultimate is when the water is circulating.
Yeah.
So with still water, you just sit in there. You'll develop what's called a thermocline. So you'll have a layer of water directly around your skin that is heated by your body. Excuse me, you guys can need a drink again. But when you're moving, either you're flapping your arms around or there's water actually actively circulating, it doesn't allow that to happen. And so you're constantly getting that cold directly next to your skin because your skin will create that little shell of water if it's completely still.
So like the one you have actually has something that swirls the water. So, and then if you don't have that and you're doing a barrel or one of these other methods, actually just slowly kind of moving your arms.
Yeah.
Which creates circulation in the water, and then it won't allow that barrier to...
I have right next to us, about 10 feet from Olivia through the wall, is that pool I have.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Well, that's 2 shots.
Sorry, people.
They're going to be blasted.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah. This is really annoying.
The only guy that's doing is Elias. Drunk.
Yeah. But I was saying I have that eye pool thing that I filled up in May. I don't put the heating element on at all, and it stays in that shed because the nights are still pretty cool here. It stays in the 50s still.
Yeah.
And when I get in there, I don't have a circulating, so I'll move my whole body around, almost like doing, kind of, flailing my limbs around.
Right.
But I think that's really helpful. So I'm a huge fan of it. It's something that a lot of people, especially when we have such a mental health problem in the United States. Oh, and by the way, it has some good metabolic effects too.
Yeah. Especially
the immersion. We start, there's brown fat activation, increasing insulin sensitivity. If you're diabetic, it's a really good thing to do.
Right.
It's just interesting how I know some tough people out there that were like, no, screw that. I'm not getting in that cold water. Yeah. It's just like, it's just an interesting thing, and people don't like being uncomfortable anymore.
I just saw a video on, it was maybe Tim Kennedy's social media, where he had a buddy trying to do it, and he got his waist in, and he was like, dude, I can't do it. And I think the guy's like a military jiu-jitsu
That's what I'm saying, man.
He was like, dude, I'm sorry, I cannot do it.
But you can, right? And so it's just interesting that...
I'm one of those, just to be clear. I am one of those.
What I would argue is the people like you then... it will be even more beneficial for...
What do you mean, you people?
You people. The you people that don't like getting in that water.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's...
The cold averse.
That's racist.
No, it's not.
Just saying.
Wow. But where a lot of the mental health benefits have is that time where you're like, dude, I got to get out.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to be shivering out of control and get hypothermia. But
don't do what Rogan did.
No, that's ridiculous. And he'll, and he knows that was dumb.
And he says it, yeah. He's like, that was very
But
dumb.
Part of staying in there when you want to get out, staying in there for another minute, when your body, that has a lot of benefits to that reward system in the brain.
Interesting.
Yeah, as far as the mental health aspect of it. So it's really, so adversity is good for you too. Yeah. It's also, I think we need a little more of that type of stuff, physical adversity.
For sure. It makes other things easier.
I think so.
Okay. And also, like I said, check out I think it's called Cold Water Recovery episode around the episode 20.
Yeah, we talked more about
it. Liv, you got a couple of questions that have come in and you would like to read them.
Yeah. So my first question
is this from you or is this from someone else?
It's from me.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
No, I just like give people credit.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is some, so we can be more personal to them. Okay, go ahead.
So why do smaller people have better cardio and energy? They always seem like they're just so fast. And I don't understand why.
Not just fast. It seems like they can just not get tired easier.
A lot of it is the degree of muscle mass you're carrying. Okay. Just in general, if you look at the body morphology of a marathon runner versus even a sprinter.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a reason why marathon runners have lower body muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Muscle mass is expensive tissue. You have to oxygenate all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of blood flow through there.
But I would think, let's say you have a big person, and then you have a small person. I would think this person has more muscle, and then aren't their lungs going to be stronger? We're talking about someone that works out and stuff like that, but lungs and heart.
No, because you're talking about relative size. You could have it's about relative muscle mass. Does that make sense? So if someone still could be 6'2", but relatively thin. Okay. Mostly, even now, when you say the small people, you're talking about weight wise.
Yeah.
You're not talking about short or tall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the difference. Cause you can have a Sean Shirk looking dude.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's freaks out there that seem just to have crazy cardio.
Yeah. He's a bad example because he's a freak.
He has crazy cardio, right?
And he's got a lot of muscle for his size.
Right.
Yeah.
But in general, and I would argue maybe if that guy leaned out, he'd be some superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Like more of like a Demetrius Johnson.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with that. With that in general, when we're talking about when we look at the weight classes, there's just not
so
near.
It's like the muscle can grow at a higher rate and get larger, which will demand more than, let's say, the heart and lungs will grow as well, or get.
Not really. You develop a training.
Because if we have two people that are, let's say, they're both 5'8",
Yep.
5'9", and then one is 150 pounds in shape, 150 pounds, and then one is 185 pounds, 195 pounds, let's say, muscular.
Right.
Typically, that thinner person, unless we're talking about someone that's in really, really good shape, the heavier one, the smaller one will typically have a better cardio.
Correct.
Is that why?
You're not feeding as much muscle mass.
But the lungs and the heart doesn't
Now it depends on, again, this depends on your training stimulus. We do see something called athletic heart. If you look at especially triathletes, people that are, cardiovascular athletes, those type of athletes, their left ventricles actually are enlarged from be able to pump more volume there. There is some adaptation to what you're doing, but it's not like your lungs are going to grow in there. You get more efficient. You get more mitochondria. Training adaptations, we always say specific adaptations to impose demand. It's called the SAID principle, where depending on how you could have two twins, genetically identical. And we've seen this before. One could be a strength athlete. One could be a more of an endurance athlete. Their body morphologies look completely different. Okay. So, and they have this so-called same heart and lung size, right? They will have little adaptations to create efficiency in that, where the strength athlete is going to be able to generate more force. The other is going to have a longer endurance. And that's the training's adaptation to
So
that.
I can imagine also, because maybe Sean Shirk is a good example in this, is that person, same size, as in height, let's say, started the same weight. The person that got all that muscle, they had to work to build all that muscle. The endurance guy, he primarily stayed with more endurance, right? So for the muscular person to match that small person's endurance, they're going to have to do all the things that got him to be more muscular. But on top of that, that's what Sean Shirk was known for, was he was very muscular, but he had insane cardio because he worked harder than everybody.
He had insane cardio, but it's a double-edged sword. You can't have your cake totally and eat it too. If you bias your training one way or another, you're going to have an adaptation to that direction. He's a genetic freak who could have gotten even more muscular if he would have just biased it to just strength training. If he would have just gone full on triathlon, perfect example. Have you seen Paul Felder lately? He was a former UFC fighter. He was a commentator, really good commentator. Yeah. He went from a jacked-looking UFC fighter. Now he does triathlons. The dude went down like several suit sizes. You see him. He's just like, he's very thin, lean, still in really good shape, but a different kind. You can see what that adaptation did to him, where he was, and no one could say he'd had bad cardio.
Yeah.
But it's all relative. The cardio in an MMA cage, but it's a different type of, you're pushing that glycolytic pathway pretty heavy on that too. You also have a good aerobic base, but not to the point you couldn't take one of those athletes and put them against a top level endurance athlete. They'll get smoked in the long, for a long distance.
So someone like Nicky Rod is like he's an outlier.
I don't know. Is he?
Well, he never gets tired, but he's pretty muscular.
But he's also very efficient in what he does too. So there's an efficiency point of it too, where black belts don't get as tired as white belts, typically. Right. Someone can have such a good wrestling or good at their movement where they're not using as much energy easily. You can get an efficiency of movement as well. I'm not saying this guy's not of course, he's an incredible athlete and there are outliers, but I'm just saying relative. You could take the same guy and have him train just for triathlons for 2 years, and he wouldn't have that. There's been a trade-off. He would get a lot better at that longer endurance thing. You're not going to be like a super long distance cardio dude, and also a jacked explosive athlete.
And that's where, like, not a perfect example, but Lance Armstrong was. Obviously, the best drugs are not drugs. The best cyclist in the world.
Absolutely.
But when he does like
marathons runner, he wasn't elite. No. It's because of that's the efficiency of the movement he's developed too. And plus, he has incredible VO2 max. And,
but even with all that, it's like he still was middle of the pack, high level, but middle of the pack rather than in cycling. He was like elite.
That's why I'm always looking for, and over the past 9 years of training, my optimum weight that I'm getting still good cardio, but I'm also retaining a good amount of strength is around 178 for me and maintaining pretty lean. When I get heavier than that and carry more muscle, my cardio starts to go. And if I get like when I cut that one time down to light, I felt like a kitten. I had really good cardio and I was fast, but I wasn't my isometric strength was lower. I wasn't as strong. So there's a nice middle ground, and it's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I have another.
Uh-oh.
I have a couple more, but okay. So the other day I was doing some training at home, and I noticed that my legs literally felt like cement blocks. Why is it that some days when you train, your legs feel lighter, and then other days, or your arms, they feel like weighed down?
Without asking another question, I will tell you what probably it is an overtraining phenomenon. It's your nervous system. Yeah, I mean, your legs literally aren't heavier.
Yeah.
Nor your arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an inhibition that it depends on. So like, let's say if you hit legs again after a hard, like we did a bunch of stand-up, let's say, in training, did a lot of shots or something, do a lot of wrestling, and then you hit heavy squats and stuff like that. You're not going to have that same amount of neural drive. And you can have the subjective experience of feeling heavy, Same with it. Depends on, whatever you're working.
So it's just a nervous system issue.
Yep.
Interesting.
It's like a governor on an engine. It's exactly what it is.
So the efficiency of your nervous system is it's that governor. It just got lowered.
It's just not letting you. It's like, hey, we're not there.
We're not letting you do more.
Correct.
Or we're trying not to.
We're trying not to. You're not recovered neurologically, right, to allow full force production. Because remember, force production is entirely a neuromuscular thing. You don't just have muscular contraction. You have, it's innervated by those motor neurons.
I just did one of those squeeze things at dropped in a week or so ago to a friendly gym there with Greg's, and they had one. They were passing it around,
A dynamometer?
I think where it shows
has a little
pounds per, and then of course it turns into a competition.
Of course, they're dudes.
Yeah, and Big Cam was there.
Oh man,
he's like 255 pounds, just ex-football player, muscle bound, big chalupa we call him. Yeah, and he was doing it, and then there was other black belts doing it, and then it was funny, and then they had me do it, and then they had this purple belt do it, and he like beat everybody.
Yep.
And he was a skinny dude that is an iron worker, I think.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And he beat everybody.
Hand size too, the leverage depending. So
he's like 6'3".
Those dynamometers have good ones anyway. The ones I use in my clinic will have different little. You can slide the handle in and
That's
out.
How it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta actually change that for your hand size.
Is it better to put it like?
If you're open
in your first knuckles or your door knocker knuckles?
Yeah, you want them in what's called the
door knockers.
The proximal.
The ones when you knock on a door.
The PIP. Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, no one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
the more your hand is open, the less mechanical advantage you have.
So that would be if you're on your first knuckles there.
Yeah. So if you're able to get it to like a 90 degree here, you can get maximum force on that thing.
Okay.
So if
you're not all stretched
right,
out.
so like I have small hands, and if you had a gripper where I'm having to stretch out, I'm going to have a pathetic grip. But if I got it to my size, I can really test it.
They were saying also like putting it down here by your hip. I don't know who told them that, but I did one like this.
Yeah.
And then I did another one. They said like put it almost like my thumb is down at my hip, and then like give it a good go. And it was 10 more pounds of pressure.
Yeah, and what we're doing, and we see this with just muscle function in general, when the elbow's away from the body in general, you're weaker. Because the shoulder joint is at risk. So that's why.
So you're chicken winging out right now.
Well, from jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. When those elbows come out, you're in trouble anyway. And you're a lot stronger when those elbows are put into your side. Okay. There's a reflex. Matter of fact, one of the things I do for shoulder rehab on people is have them do maximum grip strength squeezes throughout a range of motion with their shoulder, because there's a reflexive activation of the rotator cuff. So when I go to grip something very tightly, it tells my brain, hey, I'm getting ready to move something heavy.
Yeah.
It doesn't know that you're a dummy just squeezing a thing, right? So there's a reflexive stabilization of the rotator cuff. Okay. If my elbow's away from the body, it's not going to let that, because it's like, okay, you're going to lift something from this crappy position.
Yeah.
This shoulder joint is now vulnerable. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now when you make it very tight, close to your body, and especially it doesn't matter if it's back there, as long as that elbow's in tight, you're not going to get that inhibition. It's also a nervous system inhibition phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, one of the strongest guys I know, from back east that I friends with, Dan Senadoza, big guy, but he didn't look like a bodybuilder, and he could like rip your arm off. He bends nails, and he made me a bonsai tree with railroad ties. Those little things. He bent it. I mean, this dude's grip strength is crazy. So rock climbers have incredible grip strength. A lot of this is the leverage they can put on. So it's not the biggest, beefiest guy that you'd think had the strongest grip.
He did 180 pounds.
That's crazy strong.
Yeah. I did 147.
That's really good.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's photographer buttons.
Yeah. But I mean, they have, what's interesting is you'll look at, and I've talked about this before, one of the surrogates or very strong correlate with all causes of death as you age is grip strength. So the stronger
Peter stuff, right? No, well, sorry, he's just making it.
Well, I mean,
there was a guy that wrote a book before Peter Attia started getting on all the podcasts talking about it.
Yeah, no,
Can I get a sound effect, please?
I'm not saying my point is, I'm not trying to do this for me. I'm saying this has been something in the strength and conditioning literature for years before some doctor popularized it. I'm going to withhold my comments.
Okay. This is juicy. I didn't realize there was a little.
Talk later.
I like it. Well, okay. What was the initial question? Because I totally sidetracked us on grip stuff.
why my legs feel heavy.
Yeah, we're talking about but it's still a neurological phenomenon. It's still an inhibition type of thing. And that's why we measure grip strength to determine recovery.
Yeah, because I explained that to all those guys that hey, this is like really good. Just touch on that real quick. How for people it's an easy way to kind of judge.
Yeah, to judge your recovery. So when you're feeling really good, let's say you've been on vacation for a while, you haven't trained, and you're feeling fully recovered, get a dynamometer from Amazon, and whenever you typically wake up in the morning, just do it consistently. Get up in the morning and squeeze the thing as hard as you can, and kind of note what you're averaging. Mm-hmm. And then what you can do as you go through your training cycles is, let's say I'm feeling like, man, I'm feeling kind of tired this morning, and then I do my grip strength again, and you have a significant fall off. It tells you your nervous system isn't fully recovered. It's the same phenomenon Olivia is asking me about with her feeling heavy. To me, it's a sign of nervous system fatigue.
So, like, let's say I average 147, right?
Let's just say that's your number.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like 145, 147, 148. Like, okay, that's a good base.
And then you're 120.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's when I'm like,
you want to back off a little bit.
Even though in the morning I don't feel that bad, but my nervous system is saying, when you start working out, you're gonna feel it.
Or you're not fully recovered. That's all it's saying. And that's a good way to kind of plan what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
That day. And it's kind of nice to get an intuitive sense, that what we call interoception, where you can kind of get a self-accounting of the internal workings of your body.
Yeah.
Most of us can't feel our heartbeat.
Right.
You can train yourself to be able to get into and really being more in touch with the intuitive sense on the state of your system.
Do you know I can actually feel my heartbeat in my tongue?
Yeah. Okay.
You want to try it?
I really don't. Your tongue? What, your tongue?
Yeah, like you just grab it.
No.
It's weird, Bill.
I thought we're cool.
Not that cool.
No, I don't mind grabbing your tongue. I'm worried about you biting me or something weird. Then I have to be on antibiotics or.
I totally would.
I know usually, and especially if I've had like anything that halfway smells like sugar.
Yeah.
On my finger.
Yeah, and I know you've been dabbling in that maple syrup.
You might just chop it right off. You're like, hey, dude, I'm sorry, it's a reflex.
Yeah, they look like sausages.
Looks like a bear claw.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass on the tongue grab.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it's always there.
Okay.
You got another question, Liv?
I do.
Are you playing Bingo Blitz over there?
No, I was looking at the
dynamometer.
Yeah. And I was trying to think about like what I've pulled before, like for... Apparently, I'm very strong.
Was it
for
more
a female?
There are averages, population averages for grip strength.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, depending on age and gender. Yeah.
Would it make it different? I did it like right after training. Would that
big
probably,
time?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd figure, but
yeah.
Okay. Oh, my other question is how bad is erythritol? Erythritol? Because I saw there was a thing about MACE or adverse cardiac events, and like people who are having strokes had higher levels of erythritol in their blood. Now, obviously, I understand that those people are probably eating a bunch of processed foods, and that's not necessarily a causation correlation.
It's not, and we're doing this observational crap again. As far as and there was a big scare on this a little while ago talking about this. Oh, now they're
going to talk about what it is first.
Erythritol is another non-nutritive sweetener.
Okay.
That's used.
Like a stevia or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's generally pretty safe the way it's metabolized. Of course, everything's subject to change with long-term, when we look at long-term things, but teasing that out, it's very, very difficult. You would have to do some direct, the toxicological studies that you do on all these things. Although now some of our regulatory agencies, I can't really feel that we can trust anymore. Mm-hmm. But in general, so anything that is introduced as a food additive has to go through rigorous toxicological testing to look for any potential problems. And we may find some issues as long as it's done correctly and the regulators are doing their job. Which anymore it's kind of a who knows. But that study that in and the media loves to pick up on these observational studies.
Are these like the studies that we see where 1 week it'll say chocolate cures cancer,
Yep.
and then a month later it says chocolate's the leading cause of obesity?
Right. It's the confounders too. We use that. One of the early episodes we talked about is that whole thing. If I told you that, there's a strong association with coffee drinking and lung cancer,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's all we looked at, right?
Right.
And we didn't look at, by the way, do people that drink coffee more, do they often smoke more,
Yeah.
right? Where smoking is the actual causative factor, coffee's a correlate.
Because sometimes when they do these, right, it'll be almost like a questionnaire, right?
Totally.
How often do you drink coffee? A week. 5 days a week.
Yeah. They're notoriously inaccurate too.
Right. And not descriptive to how often do you smoke cigarettes. That question isn't even on the questionnaire.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, to me, I don't think it's a huge issue at all. I mean,
it doesn't increase like your risk of having a cardiac event.
Not that I've looked at. I mean, that's kind of my background is toxicology, and I've looked at a bunch of these stuff. And I remember when that first came out, I was scoffed at the thing because it was one other bullshit paper.
Yeah.
That seemed they love to publish this observational crap, which can be now. They can be useful because then they're hypothesis forming. It's like, hey, if we're seeing this association, we should test this.
Let's look into it deeper.
Right. And
because I think it was saying it increases risk of blood clotting.
And how?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
We need to, okay, what's the proposed mechanism? All this, not like, we're seeing increased blood clots with erythritol use. Now, look, anything is possible.
Yeah.
But,
You obviously don't know that you can't debate science.
The science?
Yes.
You have to say the science.
You can't debate the
science.
That's not how scientific method is. You don't debate about it.
No, apparently not. Actually, when I was taught, that was the whole purpose of science, right? Matter of fact, you should try to, when I was doing research, it's like you're supposed to try to shoot down your own hypothesis.
Right.
You're supposed to try to disprove it, and that's what experiments do.
Is that the scientific method?
Yeah, weird.
Yeah,
not like this is the science or I am the science, what some other people like to say.
Yeah, we don't test things anymore.
What?
I said we don't test things anymore. We just accept it.
I guess. Run with it, right? Sounds good.
Okay.
I can look further in to see if there's any mechanistic data. But I'll look into that a little further. But I remember seeing that paper when it came out. And
she had a little mini, just like, her eyebrows raised because in the monk fruit that I use in my coffee, there's that stuff in there.
You guys are fine.
Well, I figured as much. It's not like we're sitting here guzzling it and we don't eat other things like...
No.
Now, sucralose, on the other hand...
So, again, you're talking about the genotoxic stuff they may have found on that?
Yeah, I heard that's like...
Maybe. And
I don't
is
know,
it in vitro or in vivo, right? So, in other words, is it test tube type of stuff or is it actually in a biological system? Just remember, and I'm not a fan of adding a bunch of artificial shit to our stuff, but I'm just saying some of the stuff is not, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We're just going to blow it up on high fructose corn syrup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or is stevia probably better, right? So I'm not defending any of these things, but, a lot of the studies have been done. The quantities they give these laboratory animals are preposterous.
I was gonna say something insane.
Yeah, and plus the
media jumps on the first thing when even not an article, but a study might just be more inquisitive. But then an article says, look what they're saying. And they leave out that they're saying this is a potential thing. And then the media or whatever a news organization will say, there's some scientists saying that it's likely causing. So they completely change the tone.
For sure. And we look at all these things in toxicology in class, especially when you do, you look at, is this thing carcinogenic or cancer causing, right? There are criteria the World Health Organization uses, category 1, 2A, 2B, 2, in other words, is this a probable human, or is it a possible human carcinogen, or is it known to be safe? And it's a compilation of a ton of animal research and sometimes human human studies as well too.
Yeah.
But the take-home message is someone that is eating well in general exercises like, most of our community does, and has robust detoxification pathways and immune system, DNA repair mechanisms, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
Our bodies are made to kind of do that type of thing. Now, if you eat a bunch of shit, you sleep like crap, you smoke, you drink a lot of alcohol, you're already in an inflammation producing machine. So you're just adding to it with something else, and you're compromised in your ability to kind of get rid of stuff that may be problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. That's all I got.
I was having a conversation with someone. And
you might as well say it. You've been just diming everyone out anyway.
That's true. And they said I could dime them out, but you'll already know when I bring it up.
Okay.
And it was an interesting thing. We were talking about like how there in some scenarios there's time restriction on promotions. So, like for example, when you're a black belt, to get your first degree, it's 3 years.
I had the same conversation with the same person.
I know.
Okay.
He told me.
Okay.
And that's how I know you would know who I was talking about. And then for your second degree, I think it's another 3 years, right? So, but there's no getting around that. There's no, you're a phenom, so you get your first degree.
Right.
Right. Now, that there are some guidelines to time at a belt that are not necessarily as strict as that when it comes to getting your blue belt or purple, brown. The IBJJF does have a quote unquote required amount of time before they will recognize that belt as being valid, essentially, to compete in, right? So you have to spend 2 years at blue belt to get your purple belt in their eyes. Okay.
I understand.
So what I thought was interesting is, should we have that timeline that we have, that strict timeline at black belt at all the belts? Because the average amount of time to get your black belt, this is what people typically say, is about 10, 12 years.
What does that mean, though?
Well, exactly. How do you quantify that, right?
That's exactly what I want to talk about.
Yeah. And I think he mentioned...
Let's use it.
This was your...
And I used you as an example.
Right.
Okay.
Because on a calendar, because that's what we're talking about, on a calendar, 10 or 12 years is about the average. Now, just like the studies we were just talking about, you got to look a little deeper.
You do.
Now, what was your...
My counterpoint to that was, this is another black belt.
Of maintaining let's say 10 years. You cannot get a black belt until you've done jiu-jitsu for 10 years.
Okay. So let's just say, let's do a hypothetical situation. Let's just use you and I as a perfect example. I started later in life. I can basically only train for a variety of reasons 3 days a week. You, on the other hand, probably average 5 or 6, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I probably had 3 years in a row where I was doing 7 to 10 classes a week.
Right. So that's more than double.
Yeah.
And you could say even triple what I was doing. So at 10 years, who has more mat time? You have let's say I have 10 years, but I only train once a week. That is not the same amount of time under instruction or on the mats. And I think that's where, if we're going to, some time, if you were to, I'm not saying I agree with this, but if you were to put some time constraint on it, you should really look at the amount of actual time you're devoting to this martial art. So where, you're, 5 or something years?
6 now.
6 years is equivalent to a lot of people's 10 to 12 as far as mat time.
And I think that does translate to the black belt degree system, the 3 years mandatory, because let's say you get your black belt and then you train for the first year, but you fizzle out because of life, whatever. You had a kid.
You're talking about after black belt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you're just burned out, whatever, but you're not training. 3 years goes by. So now you've technically been a black belt for 4 years in total.
Yeah.
Typically, you will not get that degree, your first degree, typically, because you're not training.
Right.
Now, that's dependent on your professor, instructor.
Of course.
If they're going to give you that degree or not. But from what I've read, what I know, most want, and what IBJJF wants, is that's an active
That's
time.
Exactly right. So I think,
and that's the same with that at the coral belt level. Like you'll see coral belts that are red and black. Yeah. And then what I believe is 8th degree, and then you'll have red and white. Now red and white is still 8th degree.
I thought 7th degree is the first.
Or 7th, excuse me.
7th degree.
So that's when you get your coral. Now, the red and white is more symbolic of they are actively in the community. Now, typically you don't go straight to red and white. You have to you're a coral belt, and then you show that you're maintaining in the community, like Hercules Baptista. Yeah. He has a red and white belt because he still coaches every day. Yep. He's still in the community, active and contributing. Right. And so that's why he would get that.
Look, this is a tough one. And I'm a new black belt. So are you. Yeah. So I can just tell you my perspective. I certainly don't have, even our professor has been a black belt for 14 years. Something like that. Yeah. Okay. Which is a much better perspective. But from my thing is, I think at black belt, there's another thing where you're expected, not only are you've developed a level of proficiency in jiu-jitsu to attain black belt, but I think you start working on, are you a good leader? Are you a good coach? Are you going to teach? That takes time to develop as well too. And that is another development part of that as a leader in the community. And some of it, we have this in the military too, where we do have time and rank minimums, right? In general. And some of that is just paying your dues. And I'm not saying I agree with this, and being in the community, and these stripes are more of a showing of, I've been in this thing for a long time and I have this much experience, and not as much on, is their jiu-jitsu better than the other ones? I think it's harder to quantify at that area because it really becomes the true art at that point. People are pursuing different games. People are really concentrating on coaching, by the way. I've seen a lot of amazing black belt competitors that suck at coaching.
For sure.
And there's vice versa too. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little different and as far as that goes. And I think you have to take that into, I've been a black belt maybe 7 months.
Doesn't matter. You still have an opinion.
But my point is, it's a very limited opinion, but just from, my previous experience in the Navy and in types of hierarchies and rank and things like that, I think it's different after you get to black belt. I think it should be looked at differently. It shouldn't be looked at as a continuum. That first white to black, time on the mat, showing skill acquisition is important. But I think developing into a leader in the community and, a coach or, whatever, I think is, the years I think are appropriate. Because, how are you going to end up testing it then? Do you know what I mean? How would you get a stripe quicker? What would be the criteria for that?
So let's pivot from the black belts.
Okay.
And talk about more the requirement that's like that so let's say, what's the downside of saying you can't get your black belt in less than 10 years?
Because it promotes mediocrity.
How so?
If I told you that, I mean, I'm not saying everyone's motivated by the same thing, but I think people are less, it will give us an unevenness in that black belt where, same scenario, let's say I was someone that only trained once a week. And I'm like, well, I've been doing it 10 years. Where's my black belt? I may not have developed the requisite skill or...
Well, not saying that you get a black belt at 10 years, but it's, you can't, like, that's whether you're someone that trained as much as I did.
Yeah.
Or you trained once a week. It's, you're not going to get, so like, let's say you go on like your averages, right? So a purple belt typically can be 5 or 6 years to get purple belt. That's pretty normal.
I think it takes some of the fire out of someone. I think, like I said, everyone's motivated differently, but I think if they're like, no matter what I do, I could train 6 days a week or whatever, you know, I'm not going to, you know, this is it. You know, we see this in the government all the time where you have to have this amount of time and you know, okay, at this amount of time, I'll get this. And I'm really going to kind of do going through the motions. Not everyone, but I don't think you're going to get the fire. It
can be easy to get sucked into that, especially maybe when you're on like government employees. You get people that come in, they're full of fire and all that, or even, this is common at Boeing. Yeah. When new guys come in, they're like busting out projects, and then all the vets that have been there for 10 years.
Slow down, man.
Easy,
you're making us look bad type of thing.
We're going to come in on Saturday, get a little OT.
Yeah. See, that's my point.
It's not necessary.
Yeah. And so I think it promotes, you can look at it like a free market thing too, right? I think, you know, if someone wants to put in the time and excel, I think they should be rewarded for that. I'm not saying that belt should be the only motivator,
right?
But I mean, you know, it's a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And if you're going to put in and show the devotion to do that, it should be recognized.
Yeah.
And then you should be, you know, so I mean that brings us so much to our community, someone with that kind of passion for the art developing. And I think, you know, saying that you're going to hold that person back just because of an arbitrary time limit. Yeah. Now I do agree; those minimums I think are important. Yeah. And I don't disagree with those. Right. So
I think with the minimums, what is it? What's the fastest you can do with the minimums? The minimums used to not exist, but there's a couple people. BJ Penn, Josh Barnett, that kind of push them to make minimums.
But then, what if you get like a Travis Stevens guy, world class judo guy that comes in, you get a white belt in jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Which I think he got his black belt in 3 years.
He probably should have.
But that was the thing. He just didn't compete in IBJJF.
Right.
He competed in Copa Podio and stuff like that.
But things like that when they're coming in with a very strong grappling pedigree. So I'd have to look at the minimums again. But I mean,
what are we talking about? Which belt?
So blue is 2 years.
Blue is 2, purple's 18 months. Brown is 1 year.
1 year. That's correct.
So, is there a minimum for white to blue?
I don't know if there is.
I don't think there is because if you're a D1 wrestler, I think you can be a blue belt.
I think it's when it starts at blue.
That's right. Blue to purple's 2.
Yeah, yeah. So, how many months is that? That's
24.
Okay, so you can.
24 is blue to purple.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a year and a half at purple, so another 18 months. Right, and then a year at brown.
So 4.5 years, you technically can.
If you came in right to...
right to blue. So let's say you did like 7 months at white belt. Like, you know, you just got bit by the bug. That's what I did. Was 7 months, bam. And...
it was quick.
Yeah, so let's say now you're at 5.5, call it. Right in there.
But I think that was appropriate for you.
Right. No, I'm just saying like that's your bare minimum recognized by the IBJJF right now.
And I think that worked out well for you because I think that was a perfect time for you to get your black, in my opinion. Right. Just knowing you as a training partner and telling you, Bill, I'm sorry, you have to wait 4.5 more years to get black belt just because.
Yeah, and leaving me at purple belt. Because I would be a purple belt now.
Oh, I know.
Right. So... but what's the positives of it though? If we did have, more of a global system, not just an IBJJF system, but let's say it was 2 years each. So 2 years at blue, 2 years at purple, 2 years at, or do you like that kind of mixed?
I like the mixed thing because you need to give the professor some discretion. You really do. And I think otherwise we become, and I hate to say this, we become McDojos. There's an expectation then.
Right.
All we have now is minimums. We don't say there's no expectation that, we're not saying, you no matter how good you do, you're going to have to wait this long.
Yeah.
As far as, the ones we have set now, minimums, I think are appropriate. But when you start just, if we're going to do a 10-year black belt and says no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah.
I think that's taken away from the individual professor, because I think if you have a gym that's just giving belts away,
yeah,
it becomes readily apparent in the community. You start getting kind of dog shit black belts.
We've seen it. It's not prevalent up here by any means in the Northwest, but there are some cases that are known where it's kind of like a lot of people kind of turn their head and go,
My point is, and that's
which is what you're saying. It becomes a little obvious.
That's an academy reputation issue, and no one worth their salt wants to be known as a belt factory.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate how Andrew runs our academy. He's not about that. Right. And it's a very merit-based type of thing, and he recognizes hard work. And so I think that is something that needs to be reinforced over and over is, I think I'm a rant because I'm old. There's a societal thing that I've recognized more and more is that entitlement, right? Running in here just saying, well, I'm going to, because I do, meet the bare minimum, I should deserve this. No, you don't.
Right.
I
see part of me, I don't know what it is. I'm just speaking here. Part of me sees something about like a bare minimum to black belt, like let's say 7 years, something like that, right?
But not 10.
Yeah, 10 seems like...
That's my point.
For people that are, especially when you start getting into quote-unquote professionals or people that are really like putting in a lot of time. Let's say a 20 or 18-year-old high school wrestler that won state. We have a guy named Alan that just got back. He just graduated college. He's a college wrestler.
Yeah.
He's a blue belt.
Absolute monster.
He will give any black belt a tough round.
Oh my gosh!
If not catch him,
he's a nightmare,
and
in a good way.
Yeah, and that guy probably doesn't need to wait. Like if he continued training actively,
if he did,
yes,
because he's also a guy that's integrated his jiu-jitsu very well with his wrestling. So
someone like him, waiting 8 more years to become a black belt, if he was training actively in those 8 years, would probably be a little ridiculous.
Well, it would, because then you're taking away someone that could, let's say moved out of the area, they could spread jiu-jitsu around, become a really good coach. You know what I mean? And run his own academy. And so I'm not a fan of that. Now, I think, if you were, we could argue for years on what would be appropriate as a minimum to black belt. But I mean, mine, I can tell you, I felt like I was like, very self-conscious about about 8 years.
Yeah.
But I was super consistent though. I think that's how you should feel. I think you should feel a little self-conscious at your promotions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we've talked about this ad nauseum. You got to trust your professor, right?
Right.
He's not going to do something that, just because. But I kind of think the system now I like. It encourages hard work, but there are some.
Yeah. I do like the
minimums.
leeway that individuals like an Andrew or something like that have in being able to, if they see someone that's, progressing well or someone that's not, like that's on a stumble, and like because it gives that black belt, that promoting black belt, the ability to say, you know what, for me, this is my standard. Whether time served a certain amount or not, my standard is, it's okay. It smells like the inside of a fake leg.
Sorry, buddy.
Gosh, your stupid smile too. It makes it worse.
I know, it's kind of funny. This at least was a chicken one.
Yeah, he silently burped and blew it in my face. So it gives them the ability to have their own flavor of black belt.
Yep.
Which I do really appreciate. And even having the ability to have, let's say you have some practitioners that are on the mats, they're just monsters. They'll give anybody a tough time, if not do really well from a application standpoint. And it's up to that professor if they're like, you know what, that person needs to be belted higher or black belt, whatever. Or there's the standard of, well, yeah, their application, they're good at these few moves, but their actual knowledge, if you tell them, hey, explain to that blue belt over there what they're doing wrong with their bow and arrow.
And they can't break it down.
Can't do it. It's up to the professor if they're going to be like, there's such a monster on the mat with what they do that I don't mind that. Or maybe the person can explain really well, like their depth of knowledge is phenomenal, but their application isn't quite there. They can then help that person with application, or that's just not going to be someone that their application is tremendous, but they have such an encyclopedia of knowledge and they can convey that really well that, I don't know, John Danaher's a perfect example because, he's more crippled because of injury, but
he can still move, man.
Yeah, but his knowledge is so good and his conveying of knowledge is so good.
He's a master coach.
Right.
And that's what I was trying to say, because you'll see that divergence at black belt too, where you'll have like world-class competitors and you make world-class coaches, or I would argue more important.
Yeah. And as we know with jiu-jitsu and judo especially, is high-level competitors, they have a small bag of tools which are extremely efficient and good. And then and that's, I guess, partly a little bit where the white bar came in with the black belts, but is they're so sharp on these few things, but the ultimate knowledge isn't quite there like you would anticipate, right? Which is why a lot of people say just because someone won a world champion or Olympics or something like that doesn't mean a seminar is going to be great or they're going to be a great coach,
I exactly. And but I do think that standard should be different. I mean, I actually like how they have it for the black belts.
What do you think about stripes?
I like stripes
at all levels.
Yep, I do.
Why? Not saying yes or no.
I can tell you from everyone, especially
because some gyms don't do stripes.
I understand that,
some
and
do.
I completely do.
Yeah.
And that's fine if the culture is set. I mean, people will gravitate to what they are most comfortable with, right? And I respect both ways. I can tell you, this is a hard martial art. It is a grinding martial art. It is something that is just, it's just, there's no two ways about it. And there are times where you're going to feel like crap and you feel like you're going to in a slump. I think it's one of those things that is motivational for a lot of people. Just like, I'm putting in this work, and especially you have a professor that is actually striping people because of the hard work they're putting in, which ours does, not like because I attended 35 classes. You know what I mean? And I think that's motivational for people because they see they're like, okay, I'm putting in this work. I have no idea if I'm even getting good, if I'm knowing anything at all.
Yeah.
That can help cement, okay, no, you're being recognized by someone that does know and is recognizing that you are putting some things together and gives you that to signify that. And I think that can be a nice building block to kind of re-energize you a little bit.
It can have...
I like that.
Motivational stripes, as in like you want to help someone push a little bit, like you see them getting down or...
Well, no, but
No, I'm saying there's multiple different reasons to give a stripe. Or they are progressing and you want to reassure them that, hey, you're doing a good job. Like
that's how I think you should stripe people.
And I think people stripe on multiple different reasons. Like, to kind of be like, hey, here's a little extra weight on that belt. So you need to do more.
That's right.
You're right there. Because it's not one of those things where you're so far away that I'm striping you.
Well, most people will rise to that occasion, too.
Right.
Which I think is very powerful.
So you have two different reasons there.
Yeah.
At the same time, how you were saying, like, that person is like, that's like, they can't tell if they're getting better, but they're putting in the work, so they're relying on a professor to do that. Mm-hmm. What about when it goes opposite, where they feel like they're putting in the work, they can't tell if they're getting better, they feel like they're getting better, but they don't get striped?
I can tell you something.
And then that demoralizes them.
We had a bunch of, in the Navy, actually some very good training, leadership training. The worst thing you can do to someone that is really trying to be a high achiever and putting in work is not give them feedback. You doesn't have to be a stripe.
Right.
Okay. But a stripe is a very concrete way of doing it.
Yeah.
But just pulling them aside and like, I like what you're doing. And I think over the past 6 months. For example,
like in our gym, we have 55, 60 person classes.
It's impossible. That's my point. And so to really, and to make time.
But how do you do that when you have a 60 person class?
That's my point. You can't. And so giving a stripe is showing them that you've been thinking about them. Mm-hmm. You've been watching them.
But what I'm saying is when you don't get that stripe, but you feel like you're putting in the work, but you're like, what?
That's a different issue.
And then you start going down the pipe of like,
but
you start, as we talk to ourselves, our internal voice is a little aggressive.
But that's a different issue.
Yeah.
That's if you're not getting, if you do give stripes and you're not getting promoted, where you felt like you're putting in the effort.
Yeah.
You could ask, not that you're going to stripe grub, just say, hey, look, is there just open-ended question. Is there anything I can do to kind of improve where I'm at now? Is there something you're seeing that I need to work on?
I think that communication is huge.
It's very, very important.
And especially if you are in a gym that is growing or is bigger, right? That's going to probably have to happen. Like for the people that are out there that go to a gym and you're like, man, I got honestly 30 plus people in a class. You're probably going to have, like, if you're feeling this way, you're genuinely, and you're getting compliments from teammates, and they're like, man, you're getting good, like stuff like that. Then okay, that's some reassurance that the work you're putting in is there. But you're not getting that little stripe or whatever it is or even compliment from your instructor. Maybe it's hard to roll with your instructor because either they're injured or they're just constantly rolling, like helping the competitors.
It's just too many people.
Yeah. Or just days are off or something like that. That communication will be big to come forward to them, be like, hey, what are you looking for me to get to that next level? Or,
something like that. Or
what do you think I need to improve on?
Yeah.
Something like that. It's also tangible too. Ask for something tangible.
That's right.
From a technical perspective.
From the opposite viewpoint, from a coach's perspective, when you have that many people, it's also during the class when we're trying to go over something. If I see a 4-stripe white belt and I see a no stripe white belt, I'm like, hey, can you pair up? Do you know what I mean? Just real quick without like, okay, how long is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can, then it makes it easier to run the class too, and to maybe pair people more appropriately.
You're saying to identify with the stripes.
Yeah.
As in skill.
Yeah. As opposed to, and I know you probably know that person, but in the split second when you're trying to juggle a bunch of things, you can, you don't, I'm not going to step over. I know. But there's many, what I think they're a good thing.
Yeah.
But again, they should be merit-based. They shouldn't be given out because you think you've put in this many classes. That's my personal opinion.
I'm so torn on it. Part of me feels like there's a benefit for sure, as we've talked about. But part of me sees a genuine like blocker that I've heard from a lot of people, like about how they'll get down on themselves or they will become unmotivated.
Right.
We're humans, and I get it. to train, and I'll try to reassure someone at the gym or something like that, like it's don't work for the stripe, don't the promotion, like that, all that generic stuff. That is true.
It is true.
Right.
It's
absolutely true. If you're committed to jiu-jitsu, you're not going to remember your third stripe on your blue belt. You're not going to remember that moment ever.
And I can tell you, in our gym, if you put in the work and put in the effort, it's going to take care of itself. I can just speak for our gym.
Right. But I'm more so talking about on a timely manner. That's the thing, because people will be putting in, let's say, effort, and then they won't have, they don't get that pat on the back. Right.
Right.
Now, obviously, yes, if you're going to a gym that rewards effort and skill acquisition, whether it's on your timeline or not, the promotion will come.
Yeah, exactly.
But what happens is I think people, because we're just humans, they will feel like they're putting in extra effort, extra time, but that pat on the back doesn't happen. It's just, it is what it is. Like, a lot of people nowadays, they want a pat on the back.
Well,
I get it.
Yeah, of course. Some of it's important, but you also notice that sometimes with
someone like me, I personally, after blue belt, I didn't even care about stripes.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I was like, I'm going to be a black belt one day anyways. I fully committed and didn't care.
I think people could make arguments both ways. I'm just, from my perspective, I think it's a nice thing to recognize someone.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I see a benefit for it for sure. Mm-hmm. But I do see that there is a downside to the striping system.
Sure.
That is, that does exist. But it's one of those things where that's when it's up to the coaching staff to have communication. And
I'm obviously not the professor at our gym, nor do I want to be. But what I've had taken from Andrew's lead is, when I see someone, like if I'm rolling with someone or I'm working with someone, I see them doing something well, and I know you do too. Mm-hmm. I make it a point to say, I really like what you did there. That was excellent. You know what I mean? Just a little kind of feedback there when they've done something that I think
that's kind of what I was just saying together. Is like, the coaching staff needs to have good, like if you're even if you're a brown belt or a purple belt that helps coach,
right?
Have that communication with the lead professor that promotes people so you're their eyes and ears. Mm-hmm. Because like we said, as you get to a busier school, like I said, like 30 people in a class is a lot.
Much less 50.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you start getting up there in those numbers, like for a lead professor to pay attention to that, and I'm saying this also to reassure the people out there that are maybe feeling down, that like they feel like they've been putting in work and they haven't got that pat on the back. Like, know that because I teach a couple classes a week, like in my classes are 15 to 24 people on average. That's not a lot. I'm not even getting to that 30 number. But even that can be hard to be consistent on my pats on the back.
I think people underestimate how hard running an academy actually is.
Oh yeah.
Keeping track of that promotions is like, got to be crazy.
And then if you want your own training.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm kind of weird where I train with a lot of lower belts just naturally.
Say that word again. You're what?
I'm a genius.
Oh, I thought you said you're weird. I was like, yeah.
No. Okay. That's the old age kicking in. So that I naturally roll with a lot of lower belts and I use them to like work on stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm naturally doing that. But if I am like, you know what, I want to get my rounds in, my tough rounds in, I'm going to be rolling with the purple, browns, and blacks. And maybe even more so the brown. Like I'm going to roll with all the blacks first. # no racism. And then I'm going to roll with the brown belts. So it was low hanging fruit. Low hanging. Okay.
It's so unnecessary.
And I'm going to get those rounds in because I want to have tough rounds. That's the fun part. That's the challenge, right? And then work my way down. So then it's hard to actually judge. And I do that sometimes where it's like I don't roll with any of the lower belts for a while because I'm prepare for a tournament or what have you, or some of our guys are. So then we're rolling with them intentionally.
What's interesting, I think, I mean, it's tough. I think I've kind of revamped my training in a way where I'm picking like a day a week to roll real hard, just intentionally. And I'll do that. But I'm also picking days where I'm going to have lighter rolls with less experienced people. I'm working on a new game, just managing my own fatigue, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's working out well because I'm being able to roll and get a sense of some of the lower belts too and how they're doing and who's really doing well.
Yeah.
But they'll still have my day like Saturday where I'm rolling with black belts and,
Yeah. And having, you do 3 or 4 of those and you're like, and then you get, 4-stripe white belt. That's like, hey, you want to run? You're like, man, I'm
toast.
Sorry, I'm done.
I know, exactly.
Hopefully I'll see you next week.
Right. And I don't want, it's nice to be able to say, yeah, of course I'll roll with you. And so, making that extra time is nice too. Right. And it's not just it's a two-way street because then I get to work on some of my new stuff and I also give them a look.
Yeah.
So it's worked out pretty well.
And see how their progression's going too.
Yeah. So it's cool.
And kind of guide them a little bit if you can. But, just for people out there know that like, especially if you have a single professor that promotes, which most are, I think.
Of course.
I think most gyms are like, unless it's like a really big gym, maybe.
Like Legion, I don't think.
Yeah, like Legion has multiple people that, it's a huge gym that, and multiple instructors and there's obviously other gyms that are like that have multiple instructors that promote. But if you're at a gym that has especially a single, like, and like I said, you're getting into that mid-20s, 30s plus, just have a little grace.
And before we end here, because we'll tie up here, that point, let me circle back around to what we were talking about earlier about the time as a black belt. Watching how our professor win and how he promotes people is really instructional too, right? For me in watching, like, what's he, because I think, and that just takes time being there, right? So I think that kind of goes back to our thing where I kind of like how the black belt is, the stripes are given at black belt. So.
Well, I think a big thing is for our responsibility is, we notice it, but we need to actually have the conversations and ask, like, why'd you give them that? What made it that you felt like they deserved that? So we understand what their thinking is. And that's, shame on me that I haven't really done that a whole lot. To try to like equip myself with when the time comes that I'm promoting people, that I understand, what someone sees in like Andrew's doing. Like, rather than just trying to like guess, like, okay, he gave them a stripe because they armbarred Mo,
Usually he'll say something about like, why he's done it too, why he's promoting.
Sometimes,
So, but those are good topics.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty fiery one because it's interesting because you'll have people gyms that are no stripes ever. And they're very staunch.
Well, it's tribal, though, dude. I mean, because we don't give stripes. Oh, you're a stripe giver. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, whatever, dude.
They're more old school.
I guess.
Because it's...
All right.
You didn't do stripes.
Why don't you just have your white belt eventually turn into a black belt just from being dingy? I mean, you know what I mean? That was the whole thing. Of course. I mean, I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Because it's funny because actually the more...
And then a black belt turns into a white belt because you watch
which is kind of true.
I know
it gets crazy.
Yeah.
It does.
It's kind of funny.
I actually heard on a podcast, John-Jacques Machado was talking about how the original belts, there was white belt, a blue belt, which was like very light colored, and then another blue belt, which is a dark navy, and then black. Yeah, okay. That was the original belt progression.
Okay.
There wasn't purple, there wasn't brown, like there was a blue and then a dark blue and then black. That was like the original kind of thing. It's like, that's kind of interesting. And if you look back at some of the really old photos, you'll...
Is that why Hoist wears a blue?
Hoist?
Oh, I've seen pictures recently.
So he has a blue,
like
and
Helio?
Well, I think it was because Elio said that's his favorite.
And his black belts also have instead of the red thing, they have a blue.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the bar?
The bar. It's blue.
Interesting.
Yeah, look at Eli Knight. who's one of Hoyce's black belts. He has a blue bar, or he did at the time.
There's a couple faction of the Gracies that kind of do things a little interesting.
That's okay.
But I know Ellie always talked about like he just liked the look of the blue belt the most.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes he would just wear that.
That's
cool, just kind of funny.
That's pretty funny.
Okay, well, if you guys got any questions or you want us to talk about something specific,
I'll bring up the thing I teased next time.
Yeah.
And Olivia, great questions today.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Great questions, Liv.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe. See ya.